On that day, on midnight of that day, the Parliament will prorogue, meaning that that session would end and all the business that was in the way in that session will end, unless, of course, steps are taken to advance them into the next session. And steps will be taken on that day, on the 9th of September, to save and continue with some aspects of the work that is already in the pipeline. One of the major pieces of work that we have to get saved and take into the next session almost immediately is the work on Global Forum. That's a long and arduous journey that we have been on, and we are at the stage now where we have to make a next step. So if you want more detail on that, you can get that from the Ministry of Finance, the Minister of Finance, as to what is going to happen in Global Forum and where we are. But other than that, you would see us in the Parliament debating some matters to do with Global Forum. But on the 9th, we save it and take it forward. We also will take forward what we have already taken steps to save, and that is the two Tobago bills relating to reform of the Constitution with respect to the internal self-government improvements for the Tobago House of Assembly. That has been in the Parliament for quite some time, and we have saved it going forward. And this will be the last opportunity to do that. So it has been saved. I think we've taken steps already to save it. It will come into the next session, and it is my intention to have that work of the committee concluded very early in the next session. And that next session will begin on the 13th of September, and that will be a Friday the 13th. So we'll meet on Monday the 9th to end the current session, save some work, and then go on. And on the 13th, the work of the new term, the last term, begins, and that will have in it the conclusion of the work of that committee, which has the two Tobago bills. We will also have work from the Election and Boundaries Commission. There's a report that's been laid according to the requirements of the law under the Representation of the People Act, where the EBC had been required to lay before the Parliament some review and some recommendations with respect to the establishment of constituencies and the adjustment of boundaries and polling divisions and so on. That was in the Parliament and laid for quite some time. It has to be debated, and we'll dispense with that very quickly in the new session, which starts on the 13th. We also have in the Parliament for treatment during this session another outstanding matter from our committee, and that is to do with campaign finance reform, which is again impacting on the Representation of the People Act, where we intend to make some modernization of that, and that bill has been laid in Parliament for quite some time. It went to committee, and we will go forward with that. And we also there's an SRC report which came to the Parliament, and there were some significant anomalies in that report, and I dare say deficiencies. And the Minister of Finance had asked the Cabinet, at the advice of the Minister of Finance, had asked the Commission to look again at its report, because certain components of information seem to have been missing as they concluded their work, not the least of which were the points of views and the consultation with the judiciary. I don't want to go into any details over that, but the judiciary were literally at a standstill. And I did say to you that I had received a significant multi-page document from the judiciary pointing out how they have been treated. And in fact, it was the position of the judiciary that the commission's work in some aspect might even have been illegal. And we have sent that back to the commission and with a deadline to report, and we expect that the commission will report in a matter of days, because the intention was that they would have reported in 2 months, which ends after the cabinet did send it to the commission on August 31st. The 2 months is up. So we are expecting any time now to receive from the commission their position vis-a-vis what I just said. So we are into a very interesting, as you know, it's the last year of the term of the government. So as I tell you that the government starts its final term, its final year after the prorogation, I could easily tell you that we are into what is an election year, because I know you like to use in the context of an election year, because sometimes one gets the impression that when the government is elected, that the last year or two is not supposed to be working days or months or years, because anything you do then, there's a cacophony of some interested parties accusing you of doing it for election, as though what you had done before was for something else. But my position on that is that we will work to the last day if we have to, because we don't have automatic holidays during the period of time. So once we have working days right up to election, they will work. And with respect to the accusation that the work is being done for election, I feel good about that. Because the reason why anybody would say that something is being done for election is because they believe it is something good, which could somehow influence the electorate to support the government. And if it is something good, then there's no time as good as the present. So that tells me, once I hear that comment about it's done for election, I know it's something good that somebody wants to object to. So we'll work to the end, because we have been elected for a 5-year term, and that 5-year term comes to an end in August, and then we have 90 days after August, beyond which we cannot stay in office. So that's the picture as we see it. There are a couple of issues that I want to have clarification on, because you see, our national conversation usually is quite deficient, and there are many people who are influencers in our community who are either uninformed, deliberately or otherwise, or who are just, through their own agendas, want to influence the national conversation in a particular direction, even if they have to be malicious or play they don't know better, or in some instances are just genuinely ignorant of the facts. And where the government has facts which are different, or where I personally have information, I think I'm duty-bound to correct certain things so as to prevent the national population from being taken down a road beyond which sometimes it's difficult to return. And I believe that if there is correct information available, then people will make their choice with that as the state of play. Let me talk here about this whole question about the steel pan that has been exercising a lot of writers and commentators. I feel very good about the conversations that we've had in the last month on the steel pan, because it is happening in Steel Pan Month. It is because we have acknowledged Steel Pan Month so effectively this year that I believe that something good ought to come out of it. We have gone as a government to do a number of things, and that didn't happen overnight. It has been work that we have been doing over a significant period of time, and a lot of it has come to a head with respect to the steel ban movement, which is getting it acknowledged at the United Nations, getting it through the Parliament as the national instrument, getting it recorded in the context of patent considerations, and of course the working with Panchenbago to make Panchenbago a more solid organization to benefit not just Panchenbago, but the nation. Because if we see what goes on in the steel band movement as more than panorama, it's a hugely social activity engaging tens of thousands of largely young people. And I mean, in recent times, I dare say young women, because it appears to me in some bands that there are more young women now than men who are showing an interest, talent, and dedication and discipline in the steel band movement. And for that alone, whatever resources the government put in that direction, at least we see positives in the context of social cohesion and development. And we try to support that. And therefore, when we do the things that we have been doing this month and prior to this month, it's all for the good, with a view to having us benefit from the fact that our nation has something like that. We get advice from some people from time to time about the need to do more on socializing or using societal and cultural things, whether it is sport, whether it is steel pan, whether it is fine art, to attract young people or attract away from negative conduct into areas of positive behavior. And where we do have that being demonstrated, the least we can do is support it, because we know it's a good thing. And I made a comment the other day at a gathering. I was talking to a PNM special convention, which was called to identify a PNM position on matters for national discourse. And I am I don't want to say disappointed, because it doesn't surprise me. And I don't want to say disturbed, because it doesn't disturb me. I'm just having a difficulty finding the right word to describe the intervention of a commentator of great stature who has now decided to say that the fact that the PNM met as an organization to discuss the report of a committee whose job it was to gather from the public our very many and various views on aspects of the Constitution, and to have a point of view on every issue, that taints the process, and now the process should be thrown out because it is tainted. I don't want to express on that publicly, but I simply want to say to you in the media, so you could understand where I am as Prime Minister and where we are as PNM and where I am as a citizen. For a start, the only reason why I am behind this podium now is because I am the leader of a political party. It's called the PNM. That party has a constitution. And the reason why that party has been around here for 60 odd years is because we follow the constitution of the party. Here it is that the Prime Minister leading a cabinet, the government has asked people to express themselves to a committee about how they feel or what they want done about the Constitution. And it's open to the whole nation. There has been national consultation on this matter. It's open. Nobody is excluded. And it was made very clear that the purpose of this was, when we get these positions of the population, a document will be prepared, and that document will be advanced to a national consultation, a conference of delegates, if you call it that, on the matters that have found their way into the document and in front of the attention of this committee. That's what it is. We are taking the country, all of us, to a conference to discuss the Constitution, and we distilled and created an agenda by having spoken to people before, and issues arose, some large, some minor. But we're going to go to this conference and speak to and about those issues to see whether we can find it possible to identify those issues that have the requisite support and to make the necessary changes where they're required. In some instances, they would be required to have the attention of the Parliament. That's all it is. I can't for the life of me understand why any intelligent person would say that because the PNM has addressed the issue by talking to its members and finding out from its members what their view is, and getting the authority of its members to go forward to this conference with some PNM positions, that is anything other than a good thing. The fact that other organizations can't or will not call their members to engage the issue and to go forward in an orderly manner with their party position, authorized by their membership and supporters, I dare say, is not the PNM's fault. When PNM delegates go to that conference, they will take a PNM position confidently knowing that it has the support and authority of the membership, because we had a delegate convention that authorized spokespersons from the PNM to go to that conference and support or object to any matter that comes up there. You know what was the last thing the PNM did in that conference last? The PNM convention, which is the supreme authority of the party, authorized the General Council, which meets on a monthly basis or meets as and when required, authorized the General Council to take decisions going forward in any discussion at these conferences. That is the PNM. So we have readied ourselves to take part in that discussion. I am absolutely amazed that any person who is claiming to be educated and informed and willing to advance this country's senses will find it difficult to understand why PNM has or would have or wants to have a position. Suppose there was a conference in this country on the Constitution and the PNM doesn't show up, or the PNM shows no interest, or the PNM doesn't take part. Wouldn't that be surprising and disturbing to any and all of you? It must be, because we are, one, at this time, the government, and this is a governmental action that triggered this process, and two, whether you like it or not, you vote for us or not, we are in fact a major, if not the major political entity in the country. So how could we have an exercise like this and the PNM not take part? And how could any PNM member, political leader or otherwise, could go to a conference like this and take a position without having some clearance from the organization? And how does the organization get that clearance? We meet in special convention. One afternoon, in about 6 hours we met. And who came there? Delegates from our party units across the country. That is the most orderly political event that has taken place in this country for quite some time. And we will not be steered away from that approach of our constitutional arrangement to satisfy the folly of other people. What should be of concern to the nation and to the people who advance an attack on the PNM for that is to ask the question, how could others who want to interfere with the country's authority, to want to be the government, to want to be in a position to interfere with the Constitution, if it ever comes to that, without the kinds of process I just described there that the PNM has been through? And it can't be that the document is so offensive that other political entities will not engage it, because some of them, not the least of which the country's official opposition, from day one took the position to take part. And they didn't take part. But that is not an isolated situation, because they don't take part in anything that is national in scope. I draw your attention to the fact about Caribbean food security, CARICOM food security. We moved that issue across CARICOM to a major event in Guyana. The first event was in Guyana. I, as Prime Minister, I led Trinidad and Tobago's contingent there. And in dealing with it, I spent 4 days in Guyana, traveling all the way down to Lethem on the Brazilian border, meeting with the Brazilians and the Guyanese and CARICOM. All CARICOM prime ministers were there because we were focusing on this whole question of food security and increased food production. Guyana staged that. And the next one was to be staged in Trinidad and Tobago by Trinidad and Tobago. And we had that here as an Carry Forum here in, and all the prime ministers from CARICOM came here. And the national opposition flatly refused to even show up, to show support for our farmers, to show support for the initiative, to support the 25 by 25 initiative, where we are aiming to reduce our food import bill by 25% by the year 2025. As far as they're concerned, it was a waste of time. The only thing they're interested in is. And this event took place here in Trinidad and Tobago to great acclaim by all those who paid attention to it. The opposition, they are doing with the consultation on the Constitution, decide that their position is not to take part. The position is, we will press on. So we had it then, and we had it again this year. We have just closed a very successful agri-forum in this country with 400 participants. And I dare say, most of them young people engage in new activities, either in manufacturing or in agricultural production. That's what it's all about. And if there are people here who can't see any positive benefits in that, that is not the PNM fault. So the same way they treat agriculture is the same way they treat Independence or Republic Day, where for years they won't show up on those days because the PNM is in government and they're not part of the country. They're not part of the... I don't drag anybody to go to these functions, but these are important functions in any nation. And if there are people who find it fit not to take part, fine. But for commentators who want to lambaste the PNM because we are taking part and that we are driving it and that we are orderly and we have a constitution, you can go on your own with that. You will not influence the PNM. So we stand ready to take part, and the government will make it available to the rest of the population, that conference on the Constitution, where the committee members, who I dare say, having agreed to be advance the conversation, are now the subject of derision and pillory, left, right, and center, by those who wouldn't take part. They wouldn't take part to treat with the document of issues, but they have time to spend in casting the individuals who have done public service. I leave that to you, the population, to determine who is useful and who is not. And as for me and the PNM, we will do what Eric Williams did in 1956. We will do in 2024, 2025, and going forward, and that is to ensure that there is a PNM there with a constitution available to serve the people of Trinidad and Tobago. That's what we're going to do. And of course, as part of our advancing of the steel pan as an identity object in Trinidad and Tobago, I did say that the cabinet would take steps to exchange Columbus 3 ships for a steel pan on our emblem. You know, there's a demand by people, especially in our diaspora. I've been abroad, and I met big, strong diaspora support for the steel pan on the national flag. Some people think so. Some people think it should be all over. But simply replacing the myth of Columbus 3 ships with something that we know now is ours. That has caused a lot of conversation in some quarters. But the one I want to address is the one that is going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, I made this comment at a gathering talking to a PNM convention. I don't know why it is a problem if the PNM in government, or out of government for that matter, but in government in particular, tells PNM people what the government intends to do. Why is that offensive to anybody? If the government tells the party members at a location that the government intends to do this or do that, why is that offensive? Because we can't do it in secret. And in speaking about it, in 1 minute, I took 1 minute of or less than a minute of my speech to mention that the government intends to do that. And some people find that offensive because they're just cantankerous. You know something? If I had gone on Frederick Street and take a poll asking everybody who passing now, what do you think about the 3 ships on the emblem? 99% of the people that ask me what 3 ships. Yeah, the same 3 ships that causing all this hasikara. 99% of them will ask me what 3 ships. And I'd have to explain. 3 ships that supposedly came from the Italian fleet of Columbus out of the House of Seville into the Caribbean. And they'll ask me, what? And then I'll say, they're on the... But the bottom line is, government of Trinidad and Tobago, as part of our overall celebration and fixing the future of the steel pan, took that decision. And then we're accused of not consulting, and I am being accused and castigated personally by political party leaders and la 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 la. There's no way that can be done without the involvement of the parliament. So what is this story about the government and the party that was told about it is in fact acting inappropriately? You know how that has to be done? The parliament has to be told what the government wants to do. It is in the parliament that the public business is ventilated under law. And a series of laws have to be amended so that it can be properly done. And Parliament does not meet in secret or in private. I chair the Committee of Parliament that recommended that parliamentary business is live on television. So when I say that these changes would be made after the requisite adjustment, I didn't have to stand there and explain to you on that occasion, in that particular location, that we have to amend this law, amend that law, blah, 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 blah. But having indicated that we intend to make the change after the requisite adjustment, then I leave it. And we can spend the rest of the time going into the details. But the details are required and will be done in public. So you will see the Attorney General or somebody going to the Parliament with the requisite bills to change the regulation, and then everybody who represent anybody will have a say and a vote. Maybe on that day the PNM will not win the vote. Maybe PNM members might vote against the bill. I don't know. But it will go to the Parliament. It's a matter for the Parliament. And if something is being done by the Parliament, How in God's name you could decide to label that as party private business? That is attracting epithets that are unprintable. So they go to one of that is locally known as Rara. He's the first person they go to, and his first comment is going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And you in the media are tired of all. Stop being echo chambers for idiots. Somebody knows what he's talking about. It's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and put that into the head of citizens to give them the impression that the Prime Minister is going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, and some jump out. Or we just spend hundreds of millions of dollars on changing the money, and now we have to go and spend it to change the money again. Very simple. We are expecting, with the majority in the Parliament, to support the adjustment to the outer coat of arms so as to put the pan there in that location. It was not an exercise to treat with the coat of arms as to see whether the wheel should stay, or the crown should stay, or the wing should stay, or the feet should stay. It is specifically in the context of what we do about the steel pan. And in this case, it involves the emblem of putting the steel pan there. I'm not dealing with the issue of whether the cookie crow should be there, because it's called the national pest in Tobago, because it's destroyed agriculture in Tobago. That was dealt with already. Full consultation. Got to the point of saying shoot 3/4 of them. Right? That's true. I was agriculture minister when you had the consultation over what do we do with the cookie crow. You can't plant nothing in Tobago. From sweet potato in the ground to peas on the trees. But you have a national bird. But we're not dealing with that now. Right? And as for those who are asking about, we ships, Columbus ships, when we put it there by the majority in the Parliament, when you come into government, you're free to take your majority and take it off. That's how the system works. That's how it works. So stop pretending that the government is doing something so horrendous and so detrimental and so on. There's a process. And it's not the first time that we've made changes. When I was a child in primary school and used to get a penny, I remember when new pennies and new cents come out, you used to be glad to get a new one because they had old ones out and new ones come out, and eventually all you have is the new ones. And the last time I had that fun was 1955. And the English changed the money then, and we got new coins. We here in this country, under the first time we got polymer bills, was a $50 bill. Did we lose the old $50 bills? The new bills were introduced, and as fast as they are exchanged, because bills go in to be changed all the time. So once you decide to change one in any way, when you print the next batch, you print the new version, you don't print the old version. Whether it is the money or the logo. Well, soldiers have coat of arms on the chest and all that had to be thrown out. Why do we get on like that? And I even said 6 months, specifically referring to stationery, because every government department now has stationery. And instead of throwing it away because the government say we change the logo, over that 6-month period, you keep using up what you have. And then when you print a new stock, print the new one. So there's no question of unnecessarily engaging in millions of dollars. I could tell you no, because I'm so frugal. I might be the only person, only MP, who is still using the old Parliament logo on the Parliament letterhead. Because I have some in my office still and I'm still using them. They're blue. The new ones are red. I didn't throw away the ones that was there blue, and I will use them until they finish. That's still the Parliament letterhead. And all we have to do when we go to the Parliament to do this is to authorize that the transition takes place. We have too many schools in this country for people to be behaving like that and being led by the nose by people who are either malicious or are totally uninformed of anything useful. I spent the whole week looking on in amazement at this, and trying to make it a political issue for which somebody will pay a political price. Ladies and gentlemen, I have great faith in the good sense and common sense of the people, all the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Otherwise, I would never have entered the political arena. So, that is that. The process, after the mention and the various explanations, we will proceed to the Parliament as the law requires, and we'll see if there's a majority view of the representatives of the people to do that. And it is not reversible, and it's not irreversible. With respect to the PAN, I'm also hearing from the opposition leader that she will authorize and open a PAN factory in Trinidad. Ladies and gentlemen, if you sleep and get up like Rip Van Winkle, you would have missed. Or if you were drunk last night and you wake up next morning with a hangover, you would have missed all the hullabaloo surrounding the establishment of a steel pan factory in the industrial estate of Diego Martin in the constituency of Diego Martin West, represented by me, Keith Christopher Rowley. There is a pan manufacturing entity, a private sector investment making pan. And if you know anything about pan, to want to be a spokesperson about pan, at least you will know that we're making pan in Trinidad and Tobago. We're not even waiting on all drums to come in again. You can still use drums if you're getting them. But nowadays, the pan is being manufactured as a musical instrument in its own right in Trinidad, in Diego Martin. And then one of them who live somewhere in somebody else's country is talking about the country need. The government is failing because the country doesn't have a pan chroming business, and the government has already provided substantial financial support to the pan fraternity, to investors in chroming, and in a matter of a few weeks, a new chroming factory entity will be opened here because the government has already supported the initiative. So the manufacturing of steel pan is no longer beyond our reach and something to do. It either has been done or it is being done, but it is known and attended to by this government. This government. And of course, while we can stand on what we have done, what we are engaging, by saying that as a government, we are not unidimensional. The government is required to be engaged in a number of things at once. There are 23 ministries or thereabouts. Might be 100 government departments or more. And it is possible that each of them could be engaged in something different. So you don't have to say or to be upset about, you can't do this, you should have been doing that. If the government is functioning properly, you'll be doing all at once. And that's what's happening with the government right now. Whether it's in health, in education, in youth development, in foreign affairs, it's all being done at once. You can't say, well, I'm not going to do this because we are all focusing only on this. That is not how governments function. So have no fear. The issue of the coat of arms does not displace the issue in foreign affairs or in food availability or in national security. And that's why you have different ministries. And unfortunately, as Prime Minister, I have to have my eye on all and my hands in all, because that's why it's called Prime Minister. So I mention a development, and you get more details from a minister, or even more details from someone else in the system. I mentioned the whole question of a building on Wrightson Road. It's the old post office. It's a condemned building. As a matter of fact, the government, the mapping division isn't there because they require certain large spaces and so on. But the building is condemned. And we've taken steps to put mapping somewhere else. But the government has a policy and a program managed, not all at once, but step by step, of building government offices so as to avoid paying substantial rental and at the end of any period not having anything to show for the rental. So far, we built a Ministry of Health head office in Queen's Park East. You would have seen that. We are considering another ministry somewhere else. Social development work is underway. We didn't build both of them at once. We finished Ministry of Health. All the departments of the Ministry of Health, including PAHO, an associate, is in that building in Queen's Park East. And that will last us for many decades to come. We are doing the same thing with the Ministry of Social Development. In dealing with Pancho Bago, and that site down there being available because you have to pull along the building that is there now, it gave us the opportunity to kill more than one bird with the stone. You put that, you use that, because the government is going to require or is requiring space for a ministry. In this case, we chose to put the Ministry of Tourism there, Culture and the Arts. So these entities that can benefit from being close to the port, because we want to attract a certain kind of response. It fits it with Pancho Bago being there, having his headquarters there. And I'm told that the National Carnival Commission would be there. Most of these entities are rentals around the city. They go there, and there are synergies to be had if they're in the same building. And a theatre there allows the Pan fraternity to put on 1 hour concerts, half-hour concerts. People come there with a cruise ship. They can come straight off the cruise ship and go straight into that theatre, having paid a fee to go in there, spend an hour and still be having time to be in the city of Port of Spain. That will allow Pancho Bago to do something that they're not able to do now, right? And of course, the government will use floors in a building that it has an interest in as against renting from somebody else elsewhere. That's the plan. And the building comes with a rooftop that can be used for recreational purposes, night or day. And of course, we allow Pancho Bago to have that and to run it. And we hope they'll run it well, profitably. So there are winners all around. I know that there are people who will think that's a bad idea. But I always say that there has been nothing of a governmental decision of nature in this country where everybody has agreed on it. Not one thing ever came up in this country where we all agreed. It means that you will always have a dissenting voice because somebody always feels it shouldn't be done or it shouldn't be done now. That is not what should be done, and that's what a free society generates. And that is why it is said that you take the decision based on the view of the majority after you're satisfied that you've given respect to the view of the minority. And the final point I want to make is that it is time that the opposition leader stop using lies as public policy of the UNC. It's time she stop. She has led the charge of relentlessly attacking the Warner family and their businesses from Tobago. I am not their lawyer, and I am no shareholder in their business. But I find the attack on this Tobago family by the UNC to be obscene. To go and say that the dredging that is being done in sea lots is being done to benefit the Warners, that is a lie. And the opposition leader knows it, because it was her government in 2014 who knew then that dredging had to take place there, because it's a port area. There's the Sea Lots fishing port, there's NP port where NP brings in fuel, and then there are other people who use it along the area, smaller craft, right? And the opposition leader knows that that area to be dredged was a requirement. And you know how I know? Because they took a decision in 2014 to do it, and they awarded a contract in 2014 to do it, except that in typical UNC style, the awarding of the contract came to grief, because they did no bathymetric survey to know what the seafloor was like and what had to be removed and what depth they had to go to end up in a proper turning basin and so on. But they awarded a contract. Ask her about the contract that they awarded in 2014. But that came to grief, but the money was spent, as is typical UNC style. It having not been dredged, after the contract was operated, it falls to this government now to get it done, because vessels cannot get into NP as easily as they should, and the turning basin is not as deep as it should be. So we are the government. We have to get it done because the work has to go on. So a contract has been awarded and the work has been completed. And instead of acknowledging that the government has done what the government has to do, that had to be done, and tick it off as one of the problems solved, I have to hear the opposition leader telling untruths, because I don't really want to be too harsh, misinforming the public and attaching it as part of her attempt to destroy a business, a family, a community, by saying that this has to do with the Warner family business. Ladies and gentlemen, she's lying, man. She's lying, and she knows it. And then she goes as the official opposition leader of this country on a platform and telling the country that whatever difficulty the Warner families have with quarrying and with Presticol and whatever, the Prime Minister is godfather to Warner's son. Warner's son is his godson. She's lying again. Attempting to incite people to believe that I am somehow involved improperly with a business. So I am like, I want to end by telling Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa that this end of August would have put me in this country in my 10th year as Prime Minister. And I can say now without fear of contradiction that I've been in this office and there's nothing that I have done in that period that anybody could truthfully point their finger at me and say that I was a corrupt Prime Minister or I led a corrupt cabinet. That much could be my epitaph. And with that, I will rest in peace. But to come and talk about godson, godfather to people who are doing business with the state and that, and they will not stop, you know. When the contract was awarded in Tobago to build the terminal building in Tobago, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa and her friends in the UNC, in the parliament, came and made no uncertain terms that the contract was given to Warner by me. And when they were told that that is not correct, Warner is not the contractor, and I had nothing to do with it, they didn't stop there. You know. They came to the parliament and asked a question. They want to know every single contract that Warner got in this country. We had to answer. We are the government. We answered. Turned out not to be true. They don't intend to give up. But I hope that she continues until she oversteps and gets herself dragged into the court for slander to meet the other case she has in the court for slandering Mr. Bash of AV Drilling, who she slandered throughout a general election campaign about fake oil. Got Petrotrin to make foolish decisions, ending up in a tribunal that Petrotrin could not defend its lies and stupidity, ending up with almost $1 billion in damage to taxpayers. And all they wanted out of that is that Bash company must be closed down because he's the Prime Minister friend. The biggest amount of time that the opposition leader spends in this country is in denigrating people. And today I ask her to stop doing that. And at least come to the conference on the Constitution with a UNC position. And hopefully the UNC and the PNM could find common ground on some things, if not everything. And we are able to go to the Parliament and use our parliamentary vote to change the Constitution for the better and for the better service of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. If you can't do that, as far as I'm concerned, then you are unfit and unworthy of the assignment given to you to interfere with the conduct of the business of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. If you have any questions now, I take it from you. Prior first. Prior was chomping at the bit.
Good afternoon, Good afternoon. I see on your jacket you have the national flag, and below that the steel pan, and I think Mr. Young, who is here, also has that. Is that part of your campaign?
Mr. Young has gold, I have silver.
Is that part of your campaign to change the emblem? The coat of arms?
No, it's part of my support for Steel Band Month and the Steel Band movement. I mean, these were made by, I think, by Panchinbigo, and they distributed them, and I wear them. I wear it with pride.
Why instead of replacing the ships, why just don't add the steel pan to the coat of arms?
There are not too many prominent places on the emblem. There's a certain amount of balance and artistic taste that has to come. And again, we are expecting. We've authorized one of our better designers to, having heard what the government has said, to do some preparations, and the cabinet will view what is prepared and choose a final position. But again, that's an option. The option was to put it at the top and the side below and so on. But we more than likely will put it in a prominent place on the emblem.
Replace the ships. You will still replace the ships.
Well, where the ships are, yeah. Well, I mean that is for us the best place to go.
In terms of cost, I mean, over here in this room we have two coats of arms. I mean, every ministry would have to have that change at their offices. That in itself is a cost.
I'm saying, if you are going to make the change at the time of replacement, then there's no real new cost because you're going to replace anyway. As long as you allow it to be transitional and overlap, then there's no additional cost.
What was the actual?
When I say additional cost, I mean in the context of what was said about hundreds of millions of dollars. Of course, there would be some. You hire somebody to do the design, so on. That there would be some little cost in that. But in terms of the replacement cost for the items that are going to be using it, like the money, or the crest in the Defence Force, or the emblem on doors of vehicles, we're saying that we could exist with both until the old one is phased out. That's what we have been doing all along. When you bring in when we brought in the new $50 bill, it was allowed to coincide with the old ones until the old ones stopped being printed, and then all that was printed was the new one. I'm sure you can't remember what the old one looked like. And the same thing with for a specific period of time, when we did the demonetization of the cotton bill, that's a little different because that was done for a reason. That was done for a specific reason. Now, let me remind you what the reason was. There were a lot of people in this country who had engaged in serious criminal conduct during the term of the last UNC administration. In order to prevent those people from benefiting from their corrupt practice, we, without apology, we demonetized the cotton notes, the $100 cotton notes. And we did it in a way to allow the wider citizenry to make the change without too much pain or disruption. But those who had huge amounts of money stashed away that they couldn't go to the bank with, we allow them to keep it, and we hope it's keeping them warm. When we did that demonetization, we exchanged billions of dollars in notes. But at the end of the day, when the process was over, we even granted an extension, and the process was over, $500 million never came up to be replaced. Let me repeat that. $500 million remained with the central bank, with the taxpayer, for which no one could claim replacement notes. And therefore the taxpayers got back from those who got money improperly and had to keep it under their bed or in the drums that they have it. The central bank got that 500, or I think it was 400, almost $500 million, for which there is no claimant. Understand? And that was a deliberate act on the part of this government. That is why for 2 years, I managed that process. And when it was executed with precision, it was the most effective demonetization of any currency in the world. Because by the time the public was made aware that the government was doing that, 2 years after the process was initiated by the office of the Prime Minister, who was the acting Minister of Finance, when I signed the document, I set it in train, until the Thursday, when the country was told that the banks will close tomorrow, and on Monday morning, the new bills were available. And when that was told to the country, the aircraft was in the air with $8 billion on board. That's how you handle it. And we were told, oh, you can't do that. Christmas coming, you're going to mash up the economy, la, 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 la. Smooth like oil. And sometimes the difference between A and B is that A could do that and B don't want it done. Right? So that was one of the accomplishments of this government. And there were benefits to be had other than over and above the 500 million that didn't come back. We are now changing out the bills much more slowly. When you had cotton bills, as soon as they soiled and they come back, you have to change them again. They were not as durable as the polymer bills. And how many of you will give up the current bills for the old one? And these kinds of rara are only for a time, you know. You remember when I just became Prime Minister, what was the biggest rara for the first 6 months? 6 months. Because the public servants decided then to change out an old car in the Prime Minister's office and to buy a new one. I'm sure you all forgot that. A new car was bought for the Prime Minister's office, PM1, a Benz. It is now 9 years old, still there, being carefully used. And I used the same one that I met there for my daily. I used the car that was bought for the husband of the Prime Minister for 9 years. I'm still using it. But for 6 months in this country, that was the argument. The car, as if, you know, that is really something that should so exercise us. And it is done with so much hatred. There's a good crop of PNM haters in this country, you know. You could never please them with anything. Doesn't matter you do or you ain't do. Same approach. So I know that. But again, I would say the vast majority of right-thinking people don't get on so. And you could reason with them. Or they will draw reason by simply thinking about it. Because I'm sure if those who wrote about this changeover from the ships to the pan had thought about it a little bit, an open mind, they would have seen that the government is not crazy. We're not going to go and do something like that to incur hundreds of millions of dollars in expense. And it's not necessary. It is not necessary. But you won't give us the benefit of the doubt that we would have thought it through. Somebody says a VAPS, and therefore it was meant for election. It's a process we've been going through. It's a process. We got August 11th way back early in the year. We didn't get it done today for tomorrow. It was a whole process. There's a young lady at our mission in New York who should take personal credit because she worked diligently on getting that assignment successfully floated at the UN, and we, Trinidad and Tobago, proudly got that accolade, got that accolade at place, Trinidad and Tobago's World Steel Pan Day. What are we beating up on ourselves for? We have serious problems, you know. We have serious problems in this country, but we could walk and chew gum at the same time. Yes, Akash?
Got the contract for the new quota of arms.
Contract is an assignment.
What's the
Contract.
Which designer got the assignment?
We have asked Jim Bishop, eminent designer and artist, to look at it and give us some renderings, and the cabinet will choose the final position.
Any deadline for that?
Well, I think we need it as quickly as we can get it. I don't know when she's...
Any cost for that assignment?
Small cost. It won't be hundreds of millions of dollars.
Is any consideration being given possibly to allowing public submissions, and who will is there a committee to approve it? I know we had an emblems committee back in 1962.
Let me answer that. There is a committee that is working on this whole question of signage, which is mainly road signage, statues, and monuments, right? That work is continuing to completion. And I don't know how many people have cooperated with them to make submissions to them, but the door is open for that. I wouldn't be surprised if the people who are talking about the need for consultation have paid no attention to that. I wouldn't be surprised. But the issue of the pan was not motivated by the emblem change. It was motivated by what we are doing for the pan. And therefore, there was no issue about waiting on the emblem. Doing that in Pan month, in the year when Pan was designated as the national instrument, now is the time. Understand the difference? Good.
So when you made the announcement, you said you spent about a minute on it. And then
less than a minute.
Less than a minute.
Yeah.
And then you would have just said that you kind of lamented people didn't give you all the benefits of the doubt that the government knows what it is doing. In retrospect, do you think you should have spent a little more time just explaining the details about it, seeing
it was not appropriate. We were there gathered as delegates to deal with amendments to the Constitution. If I had stood up there for 20 minutes going into all these details, you'd have said I'm crazy. You know, criticize the speech and say, how we come there for that. As a matter of fact, some people have said I shouldn't have mentioned it at all. But it was my choice. Because talking to the PNM about what the government intends to do, as far as I am concerned, is quite normal and appropriate. But to go into the finer details, I went as far as to say when the necessary adjustments have been made. What did that mean to you? That means we know that we have to change laws to do it when the necessary adjustments have been made. I didn't have the time to, nor was it required at that particular point in time to go into the details of what the adjustments are. That will come when we approach the Parliament, because we know, and it was signaled, that we understand that it has to be done in that way. Otherwise, I would never have said when the necessary adjustments have been made, and that we expect that that could be within a 6-month period. What is the problem with us? I'm not blaming you, Akash, because I don't know which day of the year you would have, of all the things you want to do in your job, you will be spending time, unless you have a personal interest or something attract your attention, to deal with Columbus ships. But of course, since I've mentioned it, it is something we can all talk about. But what is amazing is what some people will say about it. When, the whole talk about we destroying our history. No, it is not. That's a point of view. There are a lot of points of views. I have no problem with the various points of views. It only shows that we do have people with very diverse points of views. Some people think because it is there, it should stay there. Others believe that by taking it off, we are saying that Columbus never came this way. No, none of those things. We might be saying a whole lot more. Because if it is not there and something else is there, we believe that the something else is saying more for us and about us than the ships. Not to mention the inaccuracies of what the ships portend or probably or is deemed to represent. So far as interfering with Columbus and the sanctity of Columbus's mark on our history, I want to recommend to you all, especially those of you in the media, and those of you of African descent, and those of you of East Indian descent, who came here under circumstances less than voluntary in many instances. Read a book called The History of the Indies, and read the testimony of Bartholomew de las Casas, who was the first priest that was ordained in this so-called New World. The first man who was ordained in the Americas as a priest. Read his description of the behavior of Europeans when they met people in these regions. And ask yourself, if you really could make a case for any symbolic representation of honor for those people in nations that arose after those inhumane attacks that defile humanity. Read that. And for those who would read it, look at the recommendation. When Bartholomew de las Casas, the priest, could not stomach what was happening to people by European people who came out here in search of riches, using religion as a front in search of riches, he made a recommendation to the House of Seville, where Columbus came from. And the recommendation was, ease up on the natives. They are people. And if you want people to do the free labor for you, and to look for the gold for you, and to run the fields for you, get them from Africa. And that was the beginning of slavery. There's a place in Martinique that I'm familiar with, which you all may not be familiar with, in northeast and northwestern Martinique. There's a cliff up there. And part of their history is that the natives on that island, happily living on this idyllic island, one day, the chiefs took them up to that cliff and they all jumped off to their death. That is part of Caribbean history. In response to having met Europeans or vice versa. So, if we want to acknowledge that we have been miseducated, we might be able to comprehend what is required of us now. So when people say, we want we ships, I understand what that means. And when people say we're changing history, we're not changing history, but we're telling the story from the perspective of the lion. Because the story of the hunt, there's an African proverb that said the story of the hunt is never going to be the whole story until the lion learns to write.
Mr. Prime Minister, Gabriel Henry from Street 919 FM. Is it that you also would recommend that we place the history of the pan in the schools of Trinidad and Tobago, that we are now incorporating it into our emblems? Is it now more important for our children to know where the pan came from?
Of course. And I mean, is all-encompassing. It is good for our children to know that there was a time when we had no steel pan in this country, and the conditions under which it evolved, where it came from, what drove it, the effect it had on our society at one stage. When I was growing up in my village, we had 2 steel pans in the village. I didn't go into a pan yard until I was 18 years old. I couldn't go there because my parents forbid me from having anything to do with the steel pan. Right? And people need to know these things to be able to appreciate who we are and what it is and what value it has to us. You know, to come from that situation to one where we accept with a certain amount of pride when a steel band appears at various locations in the world. That is progress. That is evolution of a society. And some people understand it, some people know it, and as others get to know more about it, they will take different positions on it. You know, it was interesting that it became a race issue. It did. A lot of racial comments spewed last week. And it was interesting that we had last week coming the closure of the Pan Classics with the orchestral bands playing at Jean Pierre. It was interesting that the leader of the champion band was an Indian. Isn't that interesting? While people were making arguments that it's an African thing and therefore is racial and divisive, the classics were won by a band led by an East Indian, the same night that they're making the race talk. So you know to take that. Yes, Jewel.
Prime Minister, just wondering, point of clarification, the 6-month period, that transition to what would be the new coat of arms, does that begin?
Actually, that really reference, when I said 6 months, I was talking specifically or more focusing on things like stationery. If it was done like today and said, as of today, only the new emblem, it would mean that all the millions of dollars of stationery across the government and elsewhere would be useless. So we believe that in a 6-month period, you would have been restocking. And when you restock, you should be able, at the end of that, sometime during that 6 months, to know that a new emblem is approved. That's why the cabinet will move quickly to approve it so that it can go out to be done, for example, like in stationery, and have it printed. So it's something that will be done without any, it's not Einstein required to do it. It's not putting man on the moon. It's a simple exercise. I understand that some people don't agree, but I also know that very many people agree that it should be done, and in fact are quite, full of pride that one day we look at our emblem and see on the coat of arms something that we can be very proud of. And that will take off a little bit of pressure off of the Kokiko.
Just period. Does that begin once the Parliament approves the amendment?
When the new it can't be done in this session, I told you we will have 1 day left on the 9th. So it's obviously going to be done when the session starts on the 10th or the 13th. We have business to do. Sometime after that, you will see us coming to the Parliament. I hope by then the AG office would have done all the work, pull all the amendments, because there are about 3 or 4 pieces of legislation, right, that need amendment, consequential amendments, to be able to do that. That's why I had said, until the adjustment is made, and there's no deadline. I took the opportunity during the Steel Band month and the year when it's been designated by the Parliament to be national instrument to say that. And I can't think of a more appropriate time. As to which day you will see the final version, I couldn't tell you today, but we're working on it.
Can somebody who is collecting their ID card or their passport today comfortably go about their business for the next 10 years and renew it when it is due for renewal as expected?
Of course, because it's not the renewal that we're dealing with. We're doing nothing to do with renewal. When you go to renew it, I'm sure you never even noticed no ship and no passport of yours. I'm sure you never looked at your passport and say, hey, look, 3 ships here. When you go for a new passport, when a new emblem is available, that passport will have it on it. If you get there before it's available, you will get the old emblem.
And it requires a simple majority, Prime Minister, civil majority, yes. Sure what
The only reason why you need a special majority in the Parliament is not because opposition members don't like what the government doing. It is because there are certain entrenched provisions in the law. Entrenched meaning you need more than a simple majority because you are interfering with the Constitution where there are provisions that are entrenched. Any other bill that the government goes to the Parliament with that is not offending the entrenched provisions, it is yea versus nay, and the yea is the majority, and if you're not sure, you take account. That's why I call for division, right? To make sure that the yeas, because if the yeas shout loudly and the nays keep quiet, and somebody wants to know for sure, you can't. The system is there. We have a system to prevent all these calamities that may portend in some people's mind, you know. So we're talking about an emblem. There's no question of a special majority. And when I talk as leader of the government to the party that put me in office, I don't have to hide to do that. Parties tell their members or consult their members and speak their truths publicly and loudly. At least you hear from the PNM and you know what the PNM is going to do because we share it with you. And if we share it with our members first, that's where it came from. Where did the idea of independence and the fight for independence come from in this country? It was from the PNM leader leading the PNM and the PNM as an organization leading the country to independence. And of course, like it was with the coat of arms, there was resistance from some quarters. Do you believe that? All the way to Mobra House, all the way through the convention, there was resistance. Fortunately, at the end, there was some coming together, and there was an agreement that we could have independence. And I keep saying to you, the government takes a lot of decisions, usually based on analysis and establishing priorities. And the government is not infallible. We don't see wrong corners, but we have to make judgments going forward. And some people enjoy being cantankerous. I'm sure you know some neighbors like that.
Media. You mentioned that the election will not be called in November. But you mentioned it won't be called in November, but there are talks. The opposition is of the belief that it will come in December. But today you mentioned we will work till the very end, till the last day. I mean, what do you think that idea came from? Is a snap election something that you will run far away from?
Well, let's put it this way. If I announce the election now, I can't have election inside of 35 days. That's the law. So even if I want the election tomorrow, can't be. If I call it tomorrow, it may be 35 days or into the next 6 months. We are not obsessed with election. We are more obsessed with governing during the period that we are the government of Trinidad and Tobago. You see, when you're obsessed with elections, I'm not saying we are mindful. We are very focused on elections, but we are not obsessed with it. We are fortunately, we are the government, and there are governmental decisions and governmental actions to be taken. And it is not all governmental actions that are popular. It is not all actions of the government that will be accepted willingly. Sometimes people resist governmental actions, but we try to take actions that are in the wider acceptance sphere of the population, bearing in mind that there will be people who have a different point of view. As I speak to you now, I'm not upset about people who are upset by the fact that the Prime Minister told the PLM gathered in Napa that the government is going to change the coat of arms. Some people are saying I shouldn't do that. I heard one leader of a party castigating me for acting as if the emblem is my own. But what do I say? What do I do? I don't do it now. The government doesn't do it now because one voice said that in that way. That is cancelled by another voice that says, we're so proud to hear that. That's an open democracy. And that is why to make decisions in the parliament or who's going to be the parliament, 51-49. 49 voices in 100 saying no and 51 saying yes. The system is that the 51 will proceed, acknowledging that. But you try to do something that will minimize that 51 down to probably 10. Because you're not going to get them to zero. Not even home in your house. You're getting zero. Opposition.
But not obsessed, but 35 days, still, December is still a possibility, even though you're not obsessed with it. It's still a possibility.
A possibility. But it's always a possibility, you know. In the Westminster system, there's always a possibility that an election could be called anytime. Well, that means you don't call election for calling election's sake. You call an election for a variety of reasons. Right? And Trinidad and Tobago is no different, and I am not engaged, overly engaged with that. But if you have some advice for me, let me know.
I remember the last...
Do you have a date in mind, Prime Minister?
A date?
A date right now?
Yeah.
In your mind?
Election day.
Prime Minister, I remember the last election, you mentioned it being your last election. Coming up to the final, you mentioned final session, final term, we're going into election mode. Would this be your final term?
I thought you or your colleagues have printed on very many occasions that politicians are not to be believed. How can you believe that? You're very convenient in what you want to believe. I wish you were believing everything else I said in that way. And then you would have believed how successful we have been in certain areas or how hard you work in certain areas. But let's put it this way. You don't have long to wait. Because whether I want to call it or not, we are well into the election year. This is our last year in the term that we have been granted when we won in 2020. So be patient. Your last 4 years of it, one more year wouldn't kill you.
It's been a month since you appointed Kit Scotland in the Ministry of National Security. Since that month, I remember recently you would have spoken out about the heinous crime. We see a 5-year-old died. Today's the funeral, actually. So we're still seeing crime going. I mean, tell us, what has happened? Have you seen any change? What are your thoughts on?
Mr. Scotland is working quite diligently with the police, working closely with the police, ensuring that the government's input into policing is very timely and providing the support of the cabinet. Because I say over and over, crime fighting is outsourced from the cabinet to the security agencies. And crime by its very nature is twofold. It's the crime that has been committed where you require to find out who is to be held accountable. And then the thought of an intention to commit crime, that's the hardest one. You don't know, in most instances, who is thinking about an execution of a crime. And we do have a violent society in which, unfortunately, a not insignificant number of our citizens are choosing crime as a business. And against that background, we have to have a variety of responses. And if I did have the time today, or the Minister of National Security, he could tell you about the number of areas that the state is engaged in trying to suppress criminal conduct in this country. And don't let anybody fool you. That crime is not being done based on who is in office. It's done on the basis of whether there are benefits to be had by the perpetrators. And as fast as you stop or suppress one area, they surprise you with new ingenuity and heartlessness. What I spoke about in Moruga, the Moruga situation is, for someone, for a citizen, for a fellow citizen, to have seen a child in somebody's hand or in somebody's presence and deliberately discharge a firearm knowing that you're going to kill that child, you are a different kind of devil. Unfortunately, we have those in this country. That's what we're dealing with. And don't give them any pass by trying to blame me, because I have the responsibility to ensure that those whose job it is to identify and to chase down and to bring them to justice, that they are on the job. That's my work. That's my job. But the people who are doing those crimes, whose son is that? Whose brother is that? Whose cousin is that will do something like that? Think it through. Because all of us in this country are a big family. And when somebody behaves like that, it's a member of our family who would have done that. Not a Venezuelan or a Guyanese or a Ghanaian or a Russian. It is somebody who we spawned here, who we fed here, who we defended here, who we gave opportunities here. And you will watch a 5-year-old child and discharge a firearm into that child's little body. I could tell you, I'm a grandfather of 4 children. And that one, on the day when I read that, it just made me feel very sad for people to have ended up producing that as part of their family. And I have no excuse to make or any empathy to hold out for people like that, because you are destroying our society. Right? And there are people making excuses for them and also asking that they be treated leniently because, oh dear me, there must be a limit beneath which you as a human being will not sink. There must be a limit to your lack of concern for your brother man, your brother sister. Because when you kill one person, it's not one person who died, A little piece of every one of us dies. And some people believe that they have a right to behave like that. And some people believe that they have a reason to behave like that. Poverty. So they have poverty. So the way out of poverty is to choose that level of violent conduct that debases all of us. And then somebody will tell me, go and break down all the doors in Moruga to find the criminals. And if you're not doing that, then you're not being the government. And of course, if I take that basket and they go and break down one door, that person will have enough rights to get somebody in trouble. We are governed by laws. There are circumstances under which you break down doors and circumstances under which you have to treat the perpetrator with all the rights that they have. That's the system we govern under. And those who are required to do it are on the job. I'm simply appealing to young people in particular in this country to take advantage of the many opportunities provided by the government and others and go down the road of a life of a productive citizen who is not engaged in violent criminal conduct.
Dr. Rowley, you mentioned just now that there are circumstances under which you break down doors, etc. And we have laws, everybody has rights. The police complaints authority.
I didn't say that.
Sorry,
that is not my argument.
No problem.
That argument is made somewhere else.
The police complaints authority has expressed, they issued a press release recently, and they said that the number of police shootings this year are up over last year. So one, your thoughts on that, and two, in many, if not all of these circumstances, police would not equip with body cams. You have any thoughts on that as well?
Well, firstly, the fact that there are more shootings by the police, the corollary that you can draw from that, the inference you can draw from that, is that more people have shot at the police. or that more people have armed themselves with a view that if the police shows up, they will shoot their way out of it, or that more arms are coming into the country to allow more people to be able to carry out that point of view. Right? So all those inferences you can draw. Which one is the correct one? I don't know. It may be a combination of all. Right? But you can't isolate as an item of prosecution in the national discourse that the police have shot people, without at the same time being concerned that the police, in attempting to protect the majority, all of us, especially the law-abiding, that they encounter people who have armed themselves to commit crimes and to shoot their way and to remain free and at large. That's what's happening. If no people are engaging in shooting at the police themselves, then I have no doubt that the number of instances where the police return fire and people are hit, that will go down. But we do know that there are lots of firearms out there, and people are arming themselves continuously. Because look how many thousands of guns we picked up in the last 10 years. Look how many thousands of guns the police have taken away from citizens in the last 10 years who had intended to keep them illegally and maybe use them in the most heinous way. But you have to tell yourself, had those not been extracted from the population, the numbers of wrongdoing with guns would certainly have been higher, much higher. So at least the police is doing the job of working towards minimizing. Every gun that is removed from the hand of a criminal is a little bit of progress we've made. But we still have a lot more to make, because other criminals, or the same criminal in some instances, will rearm himself or herself.
President, there was a boarding of the Gulfstream barge by armed criminals, I think last week Friday. Do you think that there might also be some kind of contraband on that barge? And also,
I'm not into conspiracy theories. I don't know enough about that to comment on it, but I certainly wouldn't go down that road. That barge came into Tobago, and it is part of its salvage that brought it to Sealots. So I am not in a position to go down to, and I don't know that that interpretation is a reasonable one.
Any news then on the owners of the barge that told them the Solar Creed and the Gulfstream?
I don't know that the specific owners. We've identified the item. We've identified the vessel that was taking it across the ocean. The people who are engaged in activities like that go very far, national way, to cover their risks. So far, we have not been able to isolate the individual owners who have the liability for that. But internationally, we continue to search and to cooperate with information. But those people engaged in international crime, or because it was a crime for that barge hauler to have, and the fact that tracking device available on it should tell you that the intention up front was to not be held accountable if something happens. So when they got into difficulty, they just cut it loose and Tobago paid the price. Right? We have to look at, and I think quite Africa we went. Angola, that's as far as we got. International criminal conduct. Very, very difficult to isolate the perpetrators. But we are engaged in a continuous search.
The previous question, sorry, Dr. Rowley, the last part about the body cams, you have any idea?
I know we have 7,000 policemen, and we have not set out to put body cams on all of them. I think the operational units, those units that interact with people out there, they have, and we used up the number that we had, and they purchased more. So we keep putting more and more police officers out with it. And of course, it is for them to make sure that the batteries are working and that they preserve the evidence. It's good for the system. It's good to determine what happens after something happens, so we encourage it. But that's a matter for the Commissioner of Police, which I don't want to delve into.
I was just wondering, Prime Minister, as you mentioned, the police and the amount of firearms that they have seized over the past 3 years.
But there's 10 years.
Right. But there's the issue, of course, of the firearms and ammunition illegally entering via legal or illegal ports of entry. And I'm wondering, I'm sure that there are hardworking persons in the Coast Guard, Customs, and so on, but in the next fiscal year, could there be any new measures to be announced to deal with that aspect of the amount, to stem the tide, as it were, of the amount of illegal guns and ammunition flowing into the country?
Well, yes, that's one of the priority actions. You have no idea how much effort and resources the government has put into this issue of confronting the violent criminal element in our country. You would have seen the growth of the national security budget, and in there is reflected a number of initiatives specifically to do what you are asking there for. And of course, we have isolated the situation of arms, ammunition, and those who claim them as their commerce or their business as one of the major issues for the government to deal with. 2 or 3 weeks ago, we have a heads chat, a CARICOM leaders. And one of the leaders who was under severe pressure in this country as a result of, and he's not Jamaican, as a result of violent crime and killing people in a shocking way and scary numbers, that Prime Minister put on the chat that biggest threat to our Caribbean nations is not climate change, but it's violent gang warfare. And within a matter of 10 minutes, the majority of Caribbean prime ministers were on that chat agreeing with that position. That is the situation we're dealing with across the region. And because we've identified guns and ammunition as the major component of this negative facet of our lives, we've gone to the manufacturer, we've gone to the country where the majority of the guns come from, and we have been engaged fully with that country, the United States, saying that you too have a role in this matter. We identify that as an act of commerce, you have been encouraging the export of arms and ammunition into our region. Maybe you should stop that. I personally have led that charge for CARICOM because I'm at CARICOM responsible for this area of activity. And of course, the United States government has listened and they've taken some action. We've said to them, you require to make it more difficult, if not impossible, for persons to export arms from your country into ours and not just rely on us to seal our borders. Because given the nature of our borders and the amount of resources required and the actual item of work you're asking us to do, we cannot build a fence, an impenetrable fence around Trinidad and Tobago. But if you at your end could suppress the export of arms to us, it will help. They've done that. So today, the whole federal, effectively, States is brought to bear on those who engage in export of arms and ammunition out of the United States for illegal purposes into our region. And of course, they've put resources in place. They're helping us with resources in place and training and observation and equipment and so on to ensure that we try to get ahead of the criminals. Unfortunately, the criminals have not given up. I think they will give up. But we will just have to stay on the job and maintain the pressure on people who have chosen crime as a way of life, using firearms and killing with indifference.
Prime Minister, with respect to the former Petrotrin refinery, when will you be getting the report from the committee led by, I believe, Mr. Dan Paul?
I don't know the date, but I know they're at work. I presume that sometime in the next week or two, They will present something to the cabinet because they've been at work since almost a month ago. And the intention was that, well, the submissions have been made, and they are now going through them, and they will do the evaluation. That committee is working. And I expect that sometime in the not too distant future, they will approach the cabinet with some of their findings or some of their recommendations. I most likely will not be there when that comes in. I leave the country on Sunday. I have been postponing my major medical examination now for 2 years abroad. I feel much confident and comfortable when I am examining that have been looking at me for 40 years. I have my local doctors who also play an important part in helping me to preserve my health. But I'm going to see my doctors in the United States during the process. And I hope by the time I get back that something would have come in from the committee. And you will be informed. We don't have anything to hide. And we are keen to have something come out of it. I hope that something will come out of it that we can use to the equipment operational. That will be good news for us if we do find something. I understand that there were about 10 submissions, and out of it, 2 or 3 of them appear to be usable, and they will discuss and so on.
Dr. Rowley, just one other question before you go. I know something that would have arisen in the constitutional reform discussions was the right to recall, and I didn't hear that mentioned anywhere in the PNM conference. Do you have a thought on people who addressing non-performing MPs and how that should be dealt with?
I don't know. From my glance through the report, I didn't see that in any of the summaries. I don't know if it was raised, but that is not something that I personally would agree with, for the simple reason that where that exists, it has not shown to be any positive contributor to the society. All it does is generate elections, because the same way you don't want the one that you want to recall, you have no guarantee that the replacement will not be recallable. And in our society, where we have a series of elections already scheduled on the table, I would rather take the position, be careful who you elect, pay more attention to who you elect, rather than do it willy-nilly and hope to recall them. I don't know that that is something, and I didn't see it arising as something. It might be there, I don't know, because maybe I might have missed it. But I did not see it in our summary when our people went through it, when I went through it. And I also met with the committee for a short discussion when they presented the report, and nobody mentioned that one. But even if it was mentioned, when we go to the conference, we will gauge what support there is or what argument in favor of or against something like that. That is the idea behind the conference, because the conference would last for enough time for us to be able to stand up in defense of what you believe or oppose what you object to, but do it in a civil and sensible way, or in an organized way, as the PNM will do it, as we have always done it, because we are the government of Trinidad and Tobago and we are the PNM. Thank you very much. I'll see you all again sometime soon. And if you ever hear about the election date, let me know, right?